Hey everyone, and welcome. If you're running a business, you know there are a ton of numbers to track, but there's one that can feel like a silent profit killer if you're not watching it. Today, we are dragging it right into the spotlight. So let's dive into this business owner's guide to customer churn rate, a seriously important number that every single entrepreneur needs to understand.
You ever have that feeling like you're just running on a treadmill? You know, you're working so hard to bring new customers in the front door, but it feels like just as many are slipping out the back. It's a huge pain point, right? You feel busy, but you're not really growing. Well, that leaky bucket problem is exactly what we're going to tackle today.
So how do we actually measure this customer leak? How do we put a number on it? Well, the answer is a simple but really powerful tool called your churn rate. Just think of it like a regular health check for your customer base.
At its heart, the idea is super straightforward. Your churn rate is just the percentage of customers who decide to leave you within a certain amount of time, whether that's a month, a quarter, or a whole year. You know, if you're already tracking your retention rate, that's the people you keep, then churn is literally just the other side of that coin. It's the percentage you lose. Simple as that. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Oh great, another complicated formula I have to deal with. But honestly, the best part about this is that figuring out your churn rate is incredibly easy. Seriously, let's just walk right through it. And here it is, the whole thing, right on one slide, see? It's really simple. You just take the number of customers you lost during a period, you divide that by the number of customers you had at the very start of that same period, and then you just multiply by 100 to turn it into a percentage. That's it. That's the whole formula.
And breaking it down into steps makes it even clearer. First, you just have to decide on your time frame. Are we looking at last month or maybe the last year? Second, figure out how many customers you had on day one. Third, count up how many of them left. And fourth, you just plug those two little numbers into the formula we just looked at. That's it. 4 easy steps to get a number that tells you so much.
So let's make this feel a bit more real. Imagine you're running, say, a streaming service. You start the month with a nice round 1,000 subscribers. But by the end of the month, 50 of them have canceled their subscriptions. So you take those 50 lost customers, divide by your starting 1,000, and multiply by 100. Boom! Your monthly churn rate is 5%. Now you have a benchmark. And you know that to grow your business, you have to bring in more than 5% in new customers every single month just to stay ahead. Okay, so we get what churn is and we know how to calculate it, but why should you really care, really obsess over this number? Well, it's because this little percentage is directly tied to the financial health and, frankly, the long-term survival of your entire business. And to really get why it's so important, we have to quickly talk about two different things, your top line and your bottom line. Your revenue, or your top line, is all the money that comes into the business. It's that big, exciting sales number. But your income, your bottom line, that's the actual profit you get to keep after all the bills are paid. And here's the thing, churn affects these two numbers very, very differently. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. This is the crucial point. Not all churn is created equal. Losing a customer who only ever bought one thing from you on a massive discount, that's one thing. But losing a loyal, high-value customer who buys from you regularly at full price, that's a totally different story. That's what we call high-impact churn, and it's the kind that absolutely destroys your actual take-home profit.
So you calculate your churn rate. What's a good number? Or a bad one? Well, the honest answer is it totally depends on what industry you're in. Let's take a look at a quick comparison to give you some context.
As you can see, the numbers are kind of all over the place. A big telecom company might be aiming for a tiny 1 to 2% churn each month. A streaming service, like the one in our example, is probably sitting somewhere in that 2 to 6% range. And then you have something like subscription boxes, which often rely on newness and novelty, and they can see churn rates of 10% or even higher. So a healthy rate is really all relative. Okay, now for the best part. Now that we know how to diagnose the problem, how do we actually treat it? Let's get into the real, actionable strategies you can start using to get a handle on your churn and protect that all-important bottom line.
We're going to go through 7 proven strategies. And look, these aren't just about keeping any customer. They're about keeping the right customers. You know, the ones who actually help your business grow and thrive.
All right, first up, segment your customers. Stop treating everyone the same. You need to prioritize the folks with a high customer lifetime value, or CLV. That's your most profitable group. Protect them first. Next, you've got to dig into your data and find the trigger points. You know, do customers tend to leave after the second month? Well, that's where you need to step in with some extra love. And finally, keep a close eye on your product returns. A customer who returns a lot of stuff is waving a giant red flag that they might be about to churn.
Number 5 is a no-brainer, but it's so important, speed up your customer support. Fast answers make happy, loyal customers. It's that simple. Number 6, you have to be proactive. If someone hasn't bought anything or logged in for 45 days, don't wait for them to leave. That's the perfect time to reach out with a special offer. And last but not least, be really careful with your discounts. Sure, a big sale can boost your revenue, but it often attracts customers who are just looking for a deal, and they'll be the first ones to leave, creating a churn problem down the line that hurts your real income.
So, after all of that, what's the one thing I really want you to walk away with? If you forget everything else from this explainer, please remember this one core idea.
Here it is. The big goal is not to get your churn rate down to 0. That's a losing game. Instead, you need to completely shift your focus. The real goal, the mark of a smart, healthy business, is to specifically identify and then fiercely protect the relationships you have with your most profitable customers. That is how you build a business that lasts.
And that brings us to the final question, one for you to really think about for your own business. When you look at all the effort you're putting into customer retention, who are you fighting the hardest for? Is it for everyone? Or are you focusing your energy on the people who truly build your bottom line? Something to think about. Thanks so much for tuning in.